Well, it is a pleasure to welcome Paul Johnson to our studio this morning from FH&P. Paul, given that we're just early on in June, getting set for the huge onslaught of tourists that are going to arrive here in the Valley, either bringing their own boats with them or renting boats from any one of the facilities here on the lake. Timing is everything, as they say. Great subject matter, and thank you, and good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me again.
Driven in part, I'm guessing, because in earlier conversations you'd indicated when you were a much younger man and working your way through school that you did have a job, spending time at one of the marinas, and you said, Phil, you won't believe some of the things that you see.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's no. I spent about 5 years at a marina down at Okanagan Lake Resort.
Yeah.
And at that time, they rented boats, personal watercraft, Sea-Doos, things like that. And the things that you see, people's brains tend to turn off a little bit when they get on these machines. And rarely do you ever see one of these personal watercraft, whether it's one of these jet skis or these jet-propelled boats. Rarely do you see them going anything other than full speed.
Full on is the only way that they go.
That's right.
So no matter what the pre-flight instructions might be, once I've pushed away from the dock and I'm the master of my own disaster, I am a captain flying at full speed.
Yeah, you bet. And those machines are made for fun. And
they exist for that reason only.
And that's right. And so what better way to use it than full throttle? And if you've got a buddy that you've been paired up with, or you've got two of them out there, that's where the risk happens. And what I was explaining to you earlier is that you get one person following another on those types of boats. And the person in the lead does one of these turns. They turn on a dime. They don't stop quickly, but the person in front will do a donut.
Yep.
And the person behind them won't have time to stop.
Yep.
And so what you got is a T-bone type collision, or you ramp off the person in front of you, and unfortunately, there's not a lot there to protect you from the person that's running you over.
Which is exactly the scenario that happened a couple of weeks ago here on the lake between two watercraft. And, of course, at the other end and the other extreme is Leon Reinbrecht, who has been sentenced to 3 years in prison.
Yep.
I think that we all remember that unbelievable collision as with alcohol involved. He drove following a fireworks demonstration of some type. Yes, it was on the Shuswap, not here on our lake, but it was in the interior. And his speedboat penetrated right up inside the houseboat. The operator of the houseboat was killed and 8 other people injured. That's the other extreme.
It is the other extreme, and that's incredibly unfortunate, and that's just a massive tragedy, avoidable tragedy nonetheless, I think. But like you said earlier, the alcohol and boating seems to go hand in hand, and there's laws around that. But obviously, I don't think, this is my personal view, but I don't think the police officers, RCMP, patrol the lakes as much as they patrol the roads. And so people probably get away with it more in the water than they should.
Yeah, and I would, and again, to pick up on that conversational thread, I would agree with you. I think that the prime directive for the RCMP definitely is the roads and the highways and the thoroughfares. If they have time, they have a new boat, but I think that again, for the size of the lake and its lakes, not just lake, because it's definitely Okanagan Lake, but it's also Kalamalka, and it's also Duck Lake, and it's also the lakes that are to the south of us as well.
Yeah, that's right. And they're probably stretched pretty thin, but
very.
I think they're doing a better job at it, and they realize that. But people still get away with it. I mean, the law as it relates to drinking on a boat it's basically the same as drinking in a motor vehicle. Now, there's some gray area there, not like driving in a car, just because it's governed by a different piece of legislation. The drinking and driving in a car is governed by the Motor Vehicle Act.
You can't have open alcohol in a car.
It's plain and simple.
Yes.
And the federal legislation that applies to the lake, just given its size, it's not really operated by virtue of BC legislation. It's governed by the federal government. It's a little more gray, and the way the act reads is that an operator of a boat can't drink alcohol, but then there's a bit of a gray area with respect to it being in a public place. And so the Liquor Control and Licensing Act says that you can't have open alcohol in a public place. And that's where the gray area is. I mean, you're on a boat, but you're in the public place. You own the boat, so it's private property. So where's the law there? And generally, as it's seen, as the operator of a boat can't drink alcohol. That's as simple as that.
But if you're on a deck boat or a party boat or a pontoon boat, as they are called, that are equipped with tables and galleys and refrigerators and counters, and effectively are an on-the-water hospitality center.
Yes.
Is alcohol able to be consumed when the vehicle is in motion, I guess, if you will?
Yeah, just the driver of the boat can't. And so if
Right.
it's got those things that you mentioned, it's got to be an ostensible living quarters, really. With a bathroom. I think it says that you have to have a permanent cooking facility, but that's where it gets a little gray as well.
Right.
But I know that if it's got a bathroom on the boat, you can make a good argument that you can consume alcohol legally, just not the operator. And I kind of chuckle at that because we used to own a boat, and it was a 24-foot boat, and which isn't huge. It's a big boat.
Yep.
But it had this potty on it. And
That slid under the seat.
It slid under the dashboard, and no human being under the age of 2 could use it because you'd have to be a contortionist to get your body in there. But that was what we used as our reasoning to be able to crack a beer on the boat when we were doing that. So it's like I said, it gets gray with what type of equipment you've got on the boat. So, and going back to the shoe swap, it's just that's a totally avoidable accident. Just, cut it out, especially at night on the water, with the issues with lights, whether the lights are on or off, whether you're paying attention, whether you could see them or not. I mean, it's just a bad idea in general.
Mark Burley, the program director for our 3 radio stations here at Bell Media, coined a phrase that I had never heard. He indicated to me that it is common practice and it's vocalized often, but it was water on the water, beer on the pier. And I had never heard the phrase, but suddenly it resonated with me, and it made all the sense in the water. Well, water on the water, beer on the pier.
It makes good sense. It's just unfortunate that common sense isn't always common these days.
Prevail.
And
yeah.
The problem we've got is the lake's getting increasingly busier. And, I drive by the El Dorado every morning, and you routinely see it filling up in the morning with boats and trailers, and that's just the one dock. But, any given weekend, you look on the lake when it's sunny out, and it is an absolute bee's nest of activity out there.
If you're looking at it from further up, it looks like contrails.
That's right.
Swirling across the sky.
Yeah.
But behind every one of those white lines, or at the front of every one of those white lines, is a boat of a varying size description with any number of people on board of it.
That's right.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, a little more specific and getting down to laws on operation. We've touched briefly about drinking and having alcohol open on a boat. And how do you define negligent operation? We'll be back with Paul Johnson from FH&P. If you have thoughts, if you have observations, if you're a boat owner, if you have found yourself as the object of affection of the RCMP, if you've been stopped, if you've been ticketed, certainly love to hear from you at 250-862-2525. Your personal stories, your stories about boats, water, alcohol, booze, and anything else from there on in. Back in a moment. All right, highly appropriate to welcome Paul Johnson to our studios from FH&P Lawyers. We're talking about being on the water as we find ourselves working towards Father's Day this coming weekend. All kinds of people that'll be out on the water with boat and with Dad. Any number of people. And, Paul, we were just talking about it quickly. Ron will be coming to you in a second, but we were talking about it, that for a lot of people, this is the first weekend on the water, really.
Yeah, you bet.
We've hardly dealt with wintertime runoff. The lake's at full pool. And you get a lot of people trucking in from Alberta for a first go with the boat, or just a lot of people who got the boat ready last weekend because they know they want to spend some time in the water. For a whole lot of them, there's a couple of things on a checklist that people need to be aware of. I'm going to get you to scribble out your checklist as we go to Ron. Ron, good morning.
Good morning, Phil. It's Paul.
You bet, yep.
Good morning. Question for you. I raced on the lake for over 20 years, a sailboat. I was always under the impression that the captain's responsible for what happens on the boat, as long as somebody's not totally negligent. Yet we had that situation with the houseboat where that woman was killed in the washroom, and another fellow was in control of the boat, and he wasn't charged. Is it true that if it's your boat and you're controlling it, you're responsible for what happens?
I think that's a general concept that you can abide by, yeah. And that houseboat tragedy that you're talking about, I know that one quite well because I had a bunch of friends on that boat. Mm-hmm. The operator wasn't charged criminally. However, there were civil proceedings that were generated out of that, and so that it wasn't without its lawsuits. We'll just say that.
Yeah, I was just surprised that didn't come up. But again, I guess if it's not criminal, then it just doesn't come up.
Well, that's right, and it's a different test or threshold, if you want, in terms of charging someone criminally versus civilly. And it was obviously after their investigations, for whatever reasons, they thought that there wasn't enough there to charge the guy criminally. But yeah, I mean, if it's your boat and you're operating the boat, it's kind of like the driver of the car. If someone in your car isn't wearing their seatbelt, you're going to get a ticket. Yeah. And so I think that's a general concept that you can operate by for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Ron, appreciate your call. Let us just go to. I had the Red Cross on last week. Last week was Red Cross Water Safety Week.
Sure.
And we were involved in a conversation about personal flotation device, particularly as it comes to young males who, on a statistical basis, if you look at the number of young men who die and drown, versus the number of young women who die and drown, male machismo and all the rest of it comes to play.
Yeah, that's right.
And talking about the involuntary reflex that when you fall off a boat, you don't have your life jacket on, you fall off the boat. Now, what happens is that the water is so cold. You've been sitting in the sunshine for the last 3/4 of an hour. Your body is superheated. You're very hot. As your body lands in the water, there is an involuntary gasp. You open your mouth, you suck in a huge amount of air, but as you do so, in many cases, so many people by now have fallen through, and their head actually, by the time they get there, is now submerged and not sucking in air. They're sucking in a huge amount of water.
Right.
And that is the first step towards drowning for people who are even experienced swimmers.
Yeah, that's right. And it's incredibly avoidable. And you and I talked about a month ago or two about wearing bike helmets and how it doesn't look cool to wear a bike helmet. Same thing with a life jacket. The law is that you've got to have them on the boat, but you should be wearing them.
Yeah.
And whether it looks cool or not, it's a safety factor, and anything can happen on a boat unexpectedly. For example, falling in the water. There was a young man a couple of years ago that fell off the front of his boat right near the marina,
by the El
Dorado, and that's not very deep water. They didn't find the guy.
Yeah.
And that could have been totally avoided, presumably, had he been wearing a life jacket. Yeah. And it's just a good idea. I was on the boat with my son, and I've got some boating experience in my past. And the first thing I did when I got in the boat was sew my son's life jacket on. I like to fancy myself as a pretty good swimmer with some boating experience. I didn't put my life jacket on right away. My son says to me, who's 4.5 years old and arguably brighter than I am, "Daddy, why aren't you wearing your life jacket?" Well, I put my life jacket on, but that's just an example of it.
Those are the same parents that insist that their children will wear a bicycle helmet.
Yes,
but they don't.
That's right. Yep. No, it's the same thing. So just put one on. It's avoidable. Same thing with falling under the boat off the bow. It happens lots, but these people generally aren't wearing life jackets, which could change the course of what happens in that type of accident. Yeah. And so have them on your boat. There's prescribed, regulated life jackets you need, just like DOT helmets on motorcycles. Put them on. Wear them. If you want to go for a swim, take it off. But if your boat's off, that's fine. Just put them on while you're traveling.
When you climb back up on the ladder and you get back in the boat, put the life jacket back on.
Yeah, before you take off. It's pretty simple, and it's going to avoid an accident.
Right. Are there rules and regulations as to what needs to be on a boat?
There are, yeah. There are
safety, flares, paddle. I don't know. I'm not a boater, and the closest I've got to the water was one summer when I had a personal watercraft at my command disposal, and the rules were quite a bit different there. But for a 22, 24, 26-foot boat that holds 4, 6, 8 people or whatever, are there rules?
There are rules, and not many people. Well, I certainly didn't know it before I went out and actually got my boater's license. But you need a whole bunch of things on your boat in order to bring it on side. And that's what the police, RCMP members, Ministry of Transportation are looking for when you're launching your boat. Lots of times you'll see them right at the entry point of the water. And what they're looking for is life jackets. How many humans on your boat? How many life jackets do you have? You need oars or a manual paddling mechanism.
Manual device.
A manual device, usually an oar or something to that effect. You need a bail bucket. You need a light of some sort. Usually they suggest flares. Not everyone gets their hands on flares, but to have a good flashlight on your boat's really important. You need a fire extinguisher. I think most boats generally come with that. Maybe some of the older ones don't, but put one on there. I had an incident when I was working out at the marina where a guy filled up his boat, didn't turn his blower on to blow the gas fumes out of the engine compartment, fired it on, and boom, his engine compartment blew up. Well, he had a fire extinguisher on the boat. He started hitting it. We drove out to the boat with some other ones, but there's a good reason why you want one on your boat. And you also need a bail bucket of some sort. Lots of people will cut the top of a 4-liter milk carton as a bail bucket.
It's got a built-in handle?
That's right. Something simple, but something to bail water out if your boat starts taking on water. And then a noise device. So usually it's a whistle. You see lots of life jackets with whistles on them. That's for getting someone's attention if you're in distress.
Right. If you got a problem, blow that whistle for all you're worth.
That's right.
And hopefully somebody hears you, and hopefully somebody comes looking for you.
That's right.
Yeah. Do you find that most people, and I can remember on the summer that I had access to the personal watercraft, that was also the first year that you had to take a watercraft operator's license.
Right.
You had to study the book. You had to fill out the questionnaire. And if you did it correctly, you got your little plastic card that you have in your wallet, which I still have in my wallet. Don't exercise it anymore, but I've been through the process.
Right.
Big step forward, one that was long overdue.
Yeah, I agree. It's important to do, and there's some very, very fundamental, basic tenets in there that you should understand while you're on the lake. I mean, you see some lights and buoys on the lake. You got to understand what those are for. Lots of people don't know. I think that the lake is governed by the same regulations and laws as the ocean is, just given its size. And so when you write that test, you may remember things that would apply to the ocean, not the lake. But you need to know those things. It's the law to have it. If you don't have it, you're going to get yourself into trouble with fines and not being able to operate the boat. And it's important to understand, and this is a good piece of free advice for people out there with boats, if your boat's insured, which it absolutely should be, and you flip your keys to your buddy that doesn't have one of those cards, and he goes out and piles up your boat or hurts somebody else, your insurance company will void your policy because that person didn't have their operator's license. And so
you are liable.
You're personally liable, so you're going to be in a world of financial hurt just because your buddy who you gave the keys, he may know how to drive a boat. It may have been at someone else's behest that you hit something, or maybe you hit a deadhead. Who knows? Right. Something simple. Your insurance policy won't cover the damage or the personal injury to the other people because that person didn't have the operator's card.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and that liability then runs into significant amounts of money.
That's right. Yeah. So it's important to have, and it's good to know that if your friend or somebody else is going to be operating your boat, make sure they got the card.
So that there's all kinds of scenarios that play out here. I have a boat that is sitting either docked in a marina or that sits. Maybe I'm lucky enough to have a waterfront property, and I've got a boat that's sitting in a cradle. I'm not in town for this weekend, and Billy Bob says, "Hey man, can I borrow your boat for the weekend?" Do you?
Two things: make sure you got insurance on the boat. Right. Secondly, make sure he's got his operator's card.
Right.
Because in that very instance, and that probably happens lots, where you let your buddies or friends use the boat, or family members for that matter. Make sure your insurance is there. It's very important. I've had lots of people ask me, does my homeowner's insurance policy cover boating activities? And the answer to that is generally no. Homeowners insurance policies used to cover watercrafts. They put a specific exclusion in there, especially personal watercrafts, because they were getting hammered so badly with thefts, accidents, all sorts of things. And so what they've said is, no, the homeowner's insurance policy doesn't cover boats or personal watercraft, so you have to specifically insure your boat. And any insurance broker out there will know which companies provide that.
In conversation about boating, as we get set to go into the Father's Day weekend, lots of you will be taking your boat to the water for the first time. And Paul Johnson from FH&P spending a little time taking a look at boating laws around operation of drinking open alcohol on a boat, which is one of the most contentious factors that's out there, negligent operation and personal injury. If you have any questions, this is a great opportunity for you to give us a call at 250-862-2525. We're back in a moment. Paul Johnson from FH&P. We're talking about boats, boating safety, the laws of operation, drinking and driving in boats. And one of the things that I'd long suspected or thought that it's illegal for the driver to have alcohol in his hand or in his system, but it is not if the boat that you're on has some sort of accoutrement that would indicate that there's a sort of quasi-living space.
That's right.
Taking phone calls, and let's go back to the phones. Don, good morning.
Hello. Yeah, there's one federal law that needs to be changed for boating. Why is it that you need a license to drive your boat, and yet people can come here from anywhere, never been on this lake, never been in a boat, and rent a boat without a card?
You raise a good point.
Yeah, no, Don, I've often thought that, and I've looked at that. I believe that there is some sort of rudimentary level of pre-flight instruction.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them renting boats downtown, and all they showed them is here's how you start it. This is the key. This is the gear shift, backward, forward. Okay. A bunch of people get on and away they go. I mean, you can't go rent a car without a license. How could you rent a boat without a license?
No, and I don't disagree with you. And when I worked in the marina industry, Phil's right. There was a spiel or a speech that we had to give them about what to do. Here's the safety components. This is how you operate it. Some people were different in terms of, would you take them out for a quick loop to show them how it works?
Yeah.
Or would you just let them push off and they're hammering it right as they leave the dock? But
Yeah,
I'll tell you one thing: the number of people, and there weren't many, but there were a few that asked me where the brakes were. That's what scared the daylights out of me.
Don, you point something out is that, and I'm going to try to find out more.
I mean, that's a crazy law, totally crazy law. You can't rent the car. You can't rent. You need a license. Why do you don't need a license? And they never been on this lake. They don't know the shallow spots. They don't know anything about the lake, and here they go without a license. Other people live on the lake all their life, and they need a license. That don't make sense to me.
Well, and I think, and I'm agreeing with Paul is that I think that there should be some requirement that somebody actually take all of the people who are going to be in that boat, and you leave the dock, and you have a 15 or a 20-minute FAM tour, if you will.
Yeah.
Where you demonstrate operation of the boat, and then you watch them operate the boat, and it's only when certain checks are made that you return to the boat, and the pre-flight instructor, if you will, gets out of the boat and then releases them to the water.
But none of them do that. They just showed them at the dock and a couple things, and there they are. They power it down. I mean, other boats are flapping around because they've, it says 8 kilometers an hour, and these guys just boot it, and it's just a total disgrace.
Don, you've touched on more than just a hot point. I think that it's something that needs to be followed up, and I'm committing to you that we'll get on this one.
Thank you.
No, I appreciate it very much. It's a very valid point.
No, he's absolutely right. Yep.
And it makes no sense.
No, and it's scary when you got the Kelowna Marina, I think is the one downtown here. That's right in the busiest spot on the lake, really. And they're shipping out these people in these personal watercrafts and on their boats, and I'm sure they do a great job at instructing their people on how to rent them. But when I was explaining it to people, you kind of get that doughy look in their eyes, and they're nodding their head yes. And as soon as
all I want to do is get going.
Yeah, that's
Don't
right.
waste my time. I want to get going.
Yeah, that's right. And the number of times you come back with a half a propeller or some damage to the front end of the boat because they beached it or whatever the case is. You got their damage deposit, which isn't going to cover the damage, but you just hope your insurance is going to kick in and cover that.
Right.
But, no, he's got a great point. That's an absolute valid point.
You had also said that there are other things that are involved here, and you're talking about two boats that were following line astern at night.
Yeah, so
approaching the W.R. Bennett floating bridge.
Yeah, that's right. So it was a few years ago now, but there's a case out there where some guy put in a big V8 engine. It was a custom, he beefed up his engine, and it was just a little 18-foot runabout. And I think he was probably doing time trials between Penticton and Kelowna. But what happened was he was approaching the bridge, and if anyone's been on the lake, whether it's the old bridge or the new one, it's lit up like a Christmas tree at night.
Absolutely.
And there's lights everywhere. And this boat was approaching the bridge, I believe, from the Peachland side, and he T-boned a houseboat. And the reason he T-boned the houseboat wasn't because the houseboat didn't have its lights on. Quite the contrary, it had all of its lights on, but it was washed out with the bridge light. So effectively, it blended into the bridge. And this was a bit of a lucky circumstance, and we can call it funny now because nobody was killed, but the boat T-boned it, ramped off the pontoon, and basically shot through the second deck, and it shot over the guy that was sitting on the toilet at the time. And so it literally missed the guy by maybe a foot. but it launched over his head, and T-Bone cut the boat in half, but nobody was killed happily. But it was just because it was washed out with the bridge. So it's a bit of a cautionary tale for people out there. That
put a strobe on the back here.
Yeah, really. I mean, what else can you do? I don't know. But
listen, you know what? If you look at the strobes that are on bicycles today, so that bicycles do not blend in with the street level traffic.
Yeah,
there isn't a bicycle rider out there that doesn't have a strobe high intensity red on the back and a high intensity white on the front.
Yep.
And it would be nothing to affix that to the back of your boat, to the stern of your boat.
No, that's right, and it would avoid things like that. And you can hear boats coming as well, but at nighttime, it's a huge danger. You know, really, boats typically only have the one, if they're smaller boats, the one white light at the back and the red and green at the front. Well, it's really hard to see those boats from a side point of view.
That single white light on the pole.
On the pole that would blend in with the house lights on the shore and what have you. So you got to keep your senses alert, listening and watching when you're out on the water at nighttime.
Anything else that you've got from your notes that you want to just pass along?
I just wanted, just because the lake is getting so busy with boats and there's lots of people that think that they're invincible on the water and that they know what they're doing, just be careful and keep your head on a swivel out there. You got people on paddle boards, you got people in kayaks. There's all sorts of people using the water, and it's just like the road. You got to pay attention. You got to look around you. Just be aware of your surroundings. Boats don't have brakes. They take longer to stop. Keep these things in mind when you're out on the water.
Okay. Want to go to one final untapped storyline, if you will, and that's wakeboards and water skis.
Yes.
Certainly water skiers are further out from the back of the boat than the wakeboard is. The wakeboard guys are a little closer in because they are riding that short tether.
Yes.
Or surf boats, because these days, if you can make a bigger wake, you let go of the rope and effectively you're surfing.
Yep.
But in all of these cases, rules about observer in the boat. I mean, I see a lot of guys, they've got a big sort of parabolic or wraparound rear view mirror that gives them 180 degrees. But what are the requirements about having somebody who is observing?
You need a spotter. That's plain and simple. It's a really bad idea to do.
Is that a law?
It's a good question. It may be in the regulations.
Sorry?
It may be in the regulations. I would have to double check that, but as far as I'm aware, it's required to have a spotter on the boat when you're water skiing.
In a reverse facing seat.
In a reverse facing seat, so when the guy falls, you can tell your driver that he's down, and you don't just continue on. Some other boat comes along and doesn't see this floater in the water. So whether it's a law or not, I'm not 100% sure. Is it really good common sense? Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
why would you abandon that?
Exactly. So it's a good, prudent thing to do, whether it's a law or not. Just do it. I mean, the number of times you see someone falling from skiing, and this is for personal experience as well, not realizing the person had fallen, and there's a couple people in the boat, but we might be looking at something on the beach or something in front of you.
Right.
Turn around, the guy's not there. Well,
how far back did he fall?
Well, exactly. You got to turn around and go get him. So, yeah, get a spotter, get someone paying attention.
All right. And then the final requirement you had mentioned: have a whistle, have some sort of a noise making device,
right?
Indicating that a lot of life jackets these days have a whistle that's attached to it.
Yeah. And the example there is if you're stranded, you're caught in a storm, not many other boats out there. If you see a boat floating out in the lake, you're not suspecting that they're in any distress. Well, if you start hearing noises, a whistle, people flailing around, then you know there's probably something wrong.
Right.
So it's just a good idea to have it, and it's a law. So there you are.
Rules and regulations about going to shore. I flash back to Friday and the massive microcell. The mini hurricane that rolled in over the lake. It was a sight to behold as it descended upon the city.
Right.
And those winds came down, and certainly didn't take very long for some huge waves to pile up on this end of the lake because of the force of the winds.
Right.
Again, if you're a novice boater, or if you're a novice boater or new to boating, and you have any suspicion that there is something that's about to change, are there rules about whether or not you can go to shore and whose yards you can back and beach into?
Well,
effectively,
it's a good question.
Sanctuary.
I don't think anyone's going to
refuse
you if you pull your boat up on somebody's beach, but that's not the owner's property at that point. typically you'll see buoys out front of beaches where you're not allowed to come and access a boat.
Right.
You see that at Sarson's Beach. You see that downtown at this beach. But yeah, if there's a big storm coming in, I wouldn't hesitate to pull up on someone's property. And if they come out freaking out, just explain to them that it's better this than death.
I'm new to the sport, buddy.
That's right.
And I'm preserving my life and those who are aboard with me.
Exactly.
All right. Paul Johnson, such a pleasure.
Thanks, Phil.
I appreciate it very much. And in particular, let's just revisit before we shake hands across the table and say goodbye. I think that if there is a section of this conversation that needs to be reinforced, it deals with alcohol, because for most people, the first thing that goes on the boat is the cooler.
That's right.
And the first thing that's in the cooler is our alcoholic beverages, probably on a ratio of about 3 or 4 or 5 to 1.
That's right.
There's 3 or 4 or 5 drinks per person, and it increasingly becomes a problem.
That's
so
right.
Can we just review that?
Yeah, you know what? If you're driving the boat, don't drink. Simple as that. I would, you're not going to change people's behavior, and you're not going to stop people from drinking out on the water. The police are doing the best they can to patrol that. There's not enough police out there to patrol that, but just be smart. It's, I know that gets challenging as those beverages start to get consumed, but as the driver of the boat, at least, don't drink.
Right.
It's just a matter of safety. And
Iced tea,
whatever your drink of choice is without alcohol in it. It's just like being on the road. Just be safe, be aware of your surroundings, and just given the volume of boats on the lake now with paddle boaters, all these other non-motorized kayaks, things like that on the water, there's just so many hazards. So just play it safe.
I never thought of it in that context, but yeah, the addition of the low to the water boat.
Yep.
The kayak with the person sitting down low in it, and if your bow is up, even to a degree, and you're at speed, the challenges of spotting that individual.
That's right.
In the kayak.
Yeah, that's not easy, and there's so many out there that those accidents do happen.
Yeah.
You're never going to win when you're in the kayak, and you're never going to be able to get out of the way fast.
Stand-up paddle boards.
Same thing.
Windsurfers, wind sailors.
Yep. Stay away from them.
Yeah.
Don't drink while you're driving.
Yeah.
Pretty simple tenets to live by.
Common sense.
You hope that everyone's got it.
Paul Johnson from FH&P. His direct line is 869-6018. And I think we have a call that's coming in. And if we do, I'm not going to boot you out of the studio, because the intent here is to take calls from people. No, we just disappeared. Anyway, a pleasure to have you in our studios. If you'd like to know more, Paul would be happy to take your calls, or be happy to meet with you and talk with you at FH&P.
Thanks, Phil.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
Have a great summer.
I will. You too.
On the water.
You bet.